My 16-year-old caved last night, but what that probably means is that her mom pulled her hat out of her ass long enough to realize that she'd overplayed her hand and she folded. And I got a message to that effect last night. And that means I've got 4 days to come up with a policy on how to reiterate the values which dictate how my household is run. This is like a little POV video that shares a little bit of the method to my parenting madness, which I actually learned from my grandparents, who were basically trying to tell me how they were late to realize that their children, my mom and my dad, were petulant and defiant children that used what we now call maladaptive behaviors. Maladaptive behaviors, if you're not familiar with the therapy language, is basically negative attention-seeking behavior that is designed to usurp and undercut authority while the child is the victim. They basically, I'm just sticking up for myself as they kick every child they meet in the teeth, and while telling themselves that any of the consequences that they experience is nothing more than evidence that they are the world's biggest victims. And a lot of times people call that narcissism. That's fine. You could use whatever therapy language you want, but it's basically perennial victimhood. And so I got a story to tell, which is actually pertinent because it pertains to my little brother, my baby brother. I had the benefit of being the oldest, and I'm also the bastard half-breed that the people don't really want in my family, which ironically meant my grandparents really loved me. They actually treated me pretty well. And so they taught me a set of values, because that is actually how they ran their household. And they had to actually shore up those values with the belated recognition that their eldest, in particular my mom, was just a petulant, dishonest, slippery. My grandma called her slippery, gossipy, dishonest, sort of inclined to deliver eulogies before a person died, just all of that. I actually watched her do that when my grandma was dying. It's a trippy thing. And so I learned a lot about how to, when you build a foundation of values, then any of the attempts to undercut the authority ends up being something you can address strategically. So what I had on Monday was a tactical attempt to undercut my authority while the 16-year-old ran away and said I'm the victim. But you know what? I was married to her mom for 10 plus years. And so all it was the same thing. And so whatever, my feeling is it's real simple. These are the rules. You got to be this tall to ride the ride. And if you can't, you're just gonna have to go somewhere else. It's real simple to me. And anyway, the story about my baby brother. So the Snake River flows into the Columbia. If you don't know the geography, it goes through Hell's Canyon, which is a hell of a thing. My brother and I decided we were going to swim to Idaho. So being a small person who grew up in a small town in Oregon, I'm not a big guy. I mean, I can be mean, but I'm not a big guy. And what that means is that I know how to use physics to my advantage. So I just put my body facing backwards, facing upstream, and then tread water, angling my body at about a 45-degree angle, and I let the current push me to Idaho, because that's how you do it. My brother, who's actually a pretty strong kid, big, broad shoulders, spent a lot of time fighting his way through life because he was a teen on the streets. He decided he was going to punch the Snake River to death by angling his body upstream and just going at it, and that didn't last very long. And so I was sitting on the shore in Idaho as my brother is wearing himself out trying to beat the river into submission, which is like probably not very bright. And of course there's jet boats coming down, so I'm like, brother, you got to figure your shit out, right? I can't tell him that. He had to figure it out, but he just, in a state of exhaustion, he had to actually flip over onto his back, angle himself, and then the river pulled him over. So this is a good metaphor for how to address maladaptive behaviors. If you erect your family values on a foundation of values, then any of the attempts end up being tantamount to somebody trying to swim upstream the Snake River, which is not something I recommend. And so I got 4 days to think about how to address the 16-year-old that was prepared as a proxy for her mother's latest attempt to figure out why she can't manipulate a father that left her when she was 4. Girl, you need to figure your shit out. And I don't have to solve that problem because I don't care. We're not married anymore. We're not friends. She can do that. What I do care about is a 16-year-old who's going to undercut my authority while claiming she's a victim. I got 4 days to figure that out, and it's actually pretty easy. If you're not this tall, you can go live at your mom's. And people think I don't have the will to do that, but I will remind you that my baby brother, Jason, who's been clean for like 30 years, he came and lived with me for a few days in the 90s. And I said, brother, you gotta get yourself into like a clean and sober house, and you gotta look for work, because that's just how things are in our society. And you got like 4 days to do that. And if you don't, I'm putting you back on the streets, which is exactly what I did. I literally did that. He didn't think I was going to, because he had entertained this victimhood thing. He'd been dumped on the streets as a kid by my parents, and it was Kevin and I who got him off the streets, but it was the mean half-breed brother who put him back on the streets. I literally drove him back out to Tigert. I left him there the whole time. He was like, you are a cruel bastard. You're gonna leave your brother to die. And I cried the whole way home. But anyway, later he said that was the first time that someone had forced him to be an adult. And then in a recent video with my brother Kevin, he said, no, can't put me back out there. I'll do that. If you feel it necessary to get in a fist fight with a waterfall, you should definitely fucking do that. That's my recommendation.